Hey everyone, Bruce Eckfeldt here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so we can let you know when the next video is posted. You can also check us out at eckfeldt.com for more great content. With that, let's go check out the video.
You're listening to Thinking Outside the Bud, where we speak with entrepreneurs, investors, thought leaders, researchers, advocates, and policymakers who are finding new and exciting ways for cannabis to positively impact business, society, and culture. And now, here is your host, business coach, Bruce Eckfeldt.
All right, welcome everyone. This is Thinking Outside the Bud, and I am Bruce Eckfeldt, your podcast host. Today we've got a really special guest, Riley Cote. Riley, I'm going to have your full bio in the show notes and stuff so people can kind of read all about it. But why don't we start with just a little bit of background? I'm really interested in this interview because your background with hockey and with the work that you've been doing in cannabis is this whole area that's really fascinating for me around cannabis in the kind of sports and recovery and rehabilitation space. But why don't you give people a sense of your background and how you got involved in cannabis, and then we can talk a little bit about what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I played 8 years of professional hockey. I grew up in the middle of Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba, and was introduced to cannabis at a young age. Very recreational setting. Obviously, parties. There was no science back then, nothing really to validate what I was doing. But I played 4 years in the Western Hockey League. I was never drafted, and when I turned pro, I decided to take on a different role. It landed up being the enforcer, being a fighter within the hockey game. And it was then when I really started understanding cannabis, using cannabis specifically for recovery, even though I didn't really call it that at the time. I knew it calmed my nervous system. I knew it promote relaxation and help with my anxiety and promoted rest. So,
and let me just pause you. For those that don't know hockey, so I grew up in Minnesota. I'm pretty intimately familiar with hockey. For those that don't know hockey, it's a pretty tough sport. Particularly the enforcer role is a very physical role. So as an athlete, not only are we dealing with just the physical demands of hockey, but the actual or of the skating aspect. The actual play was a very physical play. So you were dealing with fairly significant recovery aspects of the sport. And so I guess it sounds like what you were experiencing or what you were able to see is a connection between cannabis use and your ability to actually functionally recover from practice, from workouts, but the actual games themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I really started noticing that, like I said, when I started taking on that role, only because, like you said, the physical demand was much higher, but as well as the anxiety. It's hard to explain to someone. Performance anxiety is one thing. Everyone's got it to some degree, right? Whether you're an athlete or not. But fighting adds a whole other dimension to anxiety, especially when you land up fighting guys like Donald Brashear and George LaRocque and Brian McGrattan and these types of guys. So the anxiety is real. And I think that was really why I landed up leaning on cannabis initially. And what I learned was that cannabis helped me with about 5 to 10 other things as well as the anxiety, and again, going back to the recovery process of just calming the nervous system, promoting rest, healthy appetite. And then I learned that it was, really helping with my pain and inflammation. But I'd used it previously, but again, like not consistently as I was when I turned 20 and turned pro. So I really started having an understanding. I guess I was more in tune with my body at that time. So, I quietly would use it daily. I mean, it was a daily thing after practice in the evening, just really kind of as needed type of thing. And then in every league I played in, on every team I played on, there was always a group of guys that were doing the same type of thing. They were self-medicating for whatever reason. Some guys really didn't know what they were doing, and some guys probably had a better understanding of what they were doing. But fast forward to 4 years when I landed up finally making the Flyers, playing in the NHL, I was still doing the same thing. I was still managing my ailments the same way. But back then, again, there was a lot of recreational activity still, the drinking and all that good stuff. And I learned pretty quickly when I was with the Flyers that traveling with cannabis, has its repercussions. So I got away with a couple, and I eventually just said, well, this is my career. I got to stop this. I got to be a little bit smarter. And that was really when I started, kind of getting wrapped up in this downward dark spiral of substance abuse, because now I was managing my anxieties and sleep and pain unsustainably with opioids, muscle relaxers, sleeping pills, and alcohol. So needless to say, is the performance dropped. Everything kind of caved in and physical body's breaking down, and ended up retiring at the age of 28. So, immediately I had a ton of questions. I was kind of sitting there, just like pondering my life and career and asking myself, what the hell happened? And what I figured out was that, my whole life I'd really been living unsustainably. I mean, I think cannabis was probably the most sustainable thing I was doing. Unfortunately, cannabis needs to be integrated with other sustainable methods of healing. So I changed everything. I changed I changed my whole diet. I went from basically a meat eater and a protein junkie to a plant-based diet. I do still eat meat now and then, but more focusing on the sustainably farmed meat. I transitioned from, again, protein department, from the whey proteins to plant-based proteins, specifically hemp protein. And that's when I really started understanding the nutritional profile of the hemp seed and really started understanding cannabis in a different way, and understanding, this resource that was once used by pretty much the whole planet, was sidelined in the name of the Industrial Revolution and synthetics and synthetic world. So I started kind of connecting all these dots and understanding environment and understanding the things I was doing, how just unsustainable they were, and why I am where I was at the time, and understanding, the non-psychoactive cannabinoids like CBD and CBG and CBN and all these different things, and understanding that these all had healing properties as well, and learning the science behind, the brain and the neuroprotective properties of these cannabinoids for the brain. I just became extremely passionate about it and really kind of grabbed the hold of this thing and said, I need to be educating people. I need people understanding this. My colleagues in sports are just, again, I always wanted them too. And it's kind of like you're a mindless warrior. It's just go hard, go hard, go hard. And, the culture of hockey and the culture of society is just bury yourself with alcohol and whatever the standard protocols are.
Yeah,
I can't tell how many guys that I've seen, played with or played against that have substance abuse problem, a real bad addiction problem. So
it's interesting because from what I hear, it's almost more of sort of the sort of psychological stress related stuff, almost more so than the physical recovery. I mean, dealing with, as you said, the stress of playing, but the stress of fighting, and then just the toll it has on your mind of that kind of trying to maintain that kind of performance over an extended period of time is extremely taxing. I mean, would you say that, I guess, how do you balance the physical recovery aspects versus the psychological recovery aspects? Where do you see them as equal? Do you see one as more important or more effective than the other?
Well, I think they're both equally important. I mean, what I've learned is that I've spent so much time worshiping the physical body that I didn't give enough time to the mind and the spirit, and there was a price to pay with that. So I think, even though I was managing my anxieties with that, I was also doing a lot of things, again, that were promoting anxiety, and unsustainable, healing practices. So I always say, like, the physical part of the fight was the easiest part, as tough as it looks. The psychological and emotional toll it takes is hard to explain to someone, especially if you're fighting, 30, 35 times a year. And, even when you weren't fighting, you were preparing to fight. So you're in this constant state of that high energy state. You're in constant state of fight mode. And the natural response is fight or flight, and you pick one. And sometimes again, within a game, you'd go the whole game thinking you were going to fight or expecting to, and the fight would never happen. So you can imagine the constant state of anxiety. It's basically chronic anxiety. It's hard to explain. Even when the fight's done, you're worried about the next fight. So I from that standpoint, again, the cannabis certainly helped with that. There's no question. But I think cannabis is a beautiful thing. It doesn't just do one thing. It kind of like, I think that's why people gravitate towards it so much, is that, you take the edge off. Well, it takes a load off, from an anxiety standpoint, but your physical pain and the physical body feels great. And you put a smile on, you might have a couple of laughs. Like, to me, that's just general well-being. And that's what it promotes. Now, on the backside of it, after retiring and seeing all these products, now these CBD and, phytocannabinoid rich products, now you can kind of pick how you want to attack this. Like, there's topicals that strictly affect, say, the physical body, versus sublinguals that would, affect the physical body as well as the mind and the spirit as well. So I think now you're seeing this industry kind of evolve evolved out of this, this black market into this, borderline legal market, and and then the products that come out are coming out of it are unbelievable. And transdermal patches and topicals and suppositories and you name it, sprays and all this stuff.
If there's a method they've come up with,
exactly. So it's it just screams recovery. But to me, I'm a huge believer in taking care of it all. Yeah, for acute pain, if I had a muscle soreness, I would take the sublingual, or I would take it internally, so I'm getting the full body thing. But also, I'd probably use a topical as well.
Yeah. So let's go back. So you retire from hockey. You start looking at cannabis and hemp, and you're looking at the kind of the holistic recovery. Diet, nutrition, physical. Hemp comes up for you. You start looking at hemp. Sort of take us through how you started kind of getting more and more involved in this space, and what were the next steps for you?
Yeah, so right when I retired, when I started making all these changes that I mentioned, I again became extremely passionate about hemp, and I started a 501c3 called the Hemp Heals Foundation. This was in 2010. So where I was in Pennsylvania had zero legislation then. It was really a pipe dream. Nothing more than education and awareness. We put on an annual music festival in Philly and do a couple educational hempcrete, building with hempcrete workshops, and just kind of promoting the viability of hemp from a nutritional standpoint, from a building perspective, and then medicine and whatever, just kind of waking people up in a sense. So,
but this was 2010. So there was really no kind of inkling at that point that this cannabis wave would start to come, or did you sense that there was a movement, underway?
Yes and no. I mean, what I realized is that I wasn't the first person to be advocating for cannabis and hemp. I mean, it was, there's certainly a movement. I think the movement's been around, but the movement really didn't get to where it needs to be in the sports world up until like 2004, really 2013, 2014, when the 2014 Farm Act 7606 came out, when cannabinoids became really apparent and all over the place, really. And that's when kind of athletes were introduced to these non-psychoactive cannabinoids, when they started speaking out a lot more and being introduced to them. And that's where I started meeting these other athletes at different conferences. So the Hemp Heals landed up evolving, in a sense, not the actual organization itself, but my time landed up evolving to just really normalizing cannabinoids through sports. I realized these guys all had their version of my story. And and
we're probably doing it quietly, or kind of under the radar, themselves, maybe doing it right, maybe not quite so right, but they were self-medicating.
Exactly. And some guys will be talking about self-medicating with actual your dry herb, like the way we all did it. It seems like, but then the other guys were kind of newly introduced to it after they retired from a really industrial hemp derived CBD component, non-psychoactive. So you do see both sides of it, and the stories are a little different when you talk to some of these guys. But nonetheless, it was professional athletes or former professional athletes coming out and speaking about how these cannabinoids help them, THC or not. I mean, that's just for the individual to figure out what they need. But nonetheless, the messaging is really the same. Cannabinoid is a cannabinoid. We just have to undemonize just the THC molecule. I think once we get past that, we can understand this healing plant a little bit better. But it wasn't until then that the real sports movement, integrating sports and cannabis and normalizing cannabinoids through sports really started in my life. And so that kind of, then the hemp heals kind of got in the background. Right around that time, there was legislation in Pennsylvania. And then eventually the laws got passed. Now we have an agriculture pilot program and a medical program. So I think the mission needs to be changed on that side of it. But my time has really been transitioned into the Athletes for Care program, which I just see so much more opportunity there, and not selfishly just worrying about athletes. I think that's what the name maybe sounds like that, but it really lands up being normalizing cannabinoids for all people through sports. We're just using our platform and our voice to tell stories and have science back up our stories. And any sort of research we're going to engage in benefits the general public. It's not, this is not selfishly just about us. This is just using our background, our story, and experience to, again, normalize the message.
So Athletes for Care is a new, it's a 503c, or what's the entity?
Yeah, it is a 501c3, yeah.
501c3, okay. And I guess, so you're looking to basically promote sort of a healthy, unbiased use of cannabis-based products using the kind of athletic platform or your experience and network as an athlete, as a professional athlete. So what kind of programs are you engaging with, and what do you actually do with the organization?
Yeah, so the overall mission of Athletes for Care is to promote wellness. I mean, wellness to me, cannabis and hemp are the centerpiece of wellness, but we can't ignore other pieces of wellness like meditation, yoga, nutritional healing, and the rest of the natural world. So I want to be clear that it's bigger than cannabis, but the obvious elephant in the room is that the cannabis is a very immediate healing tool. You know, I mean, you can get a lot of relief quickly, and the fact that it's borderline illegal still, the urgency is and the focus is on that. Yeah. So education and awareness is a big part of getting the community. So like, again, a lot of what we do now is we go to different conferences, whether it's an actual cannabis conference or a health and wellness conference or an anti-aging conference, whatever it lands up being. We get these opportunities to put together panels of 3 or 4 athletes, and then we have a medical doctor or some sort of researcher to verify our stories through science. So again, it legitimizes the story with science, because God knows we need that to make this thing as real as it can be. Yeah. And then above and beyond that, we'll end up being a support system for guys. A lot of guys got different issues. So, depending on what they're dealing with and reach out to us with, we would kind of guide them into the right direction of the right professional.
So are you speaking to professional athletes in general, or just people that are interested in wholeness and sort of holistic wellness?
It lands up being a little bit of everything, honestly. I mean, again, the Athletes for Care, a lot of them are former professional athletes, but we got collegiate athletes, we got guys that played, junior level or whatever. Yeah. The story remains the same. It's just that it started off as a group of former professional athletes using their voice, but it's not exclusively for that. So we have like a members only type of thing where, again, like for anybody that would pay a small fee to get certain resources versus the general public, if you just want to follow along and kind of learn about what we're doing, that's fine too. But I think there are a lot of services we would offer are worth investing a few dollars, because I mean above and beyond.
So let's use an example. So if I was high school athlete, rode in college, I've done Ironman, I've kind of weekend warrior type, fractured a vertebrae a couple of years ago. Ended up having spinal fusion, L4, L5, S1. I certainly am in kind of this camp of, middle-aged guy who has generally been very, very active, but has been going through more kind of health constraints in terms of physical body issues, pain, sort of chronic pain around certain parts of my body. Would this be something that, is there an offering? Are you putting together offerings for someone like me to be able to help figure out how to put together a plan that includes various cannabinoids as well as meditation and things like that? Is that the idea?
Yes, that is the idea. And it would all depend on every person or every athlete or every person that kind of joins has a different story, a different reason why, they're hitting us up. Some guys don't need the healing side of it. They want opportunity. You know what I mean? So that's the other side of Athletes for Care is, as great as the healing tool of cannabis is, there's more to it. It's economics, it's job creation, job placement, investment on opportunity. So we have an arm that lands up doing exactly that, vetting deals, and that would be something on the membership side that you land up paying for, because again, if we're going to give you resources to vet deals and to job opportunities and stuff like that, there has to be some sort of trade-off at some point for the organization. But nonetheless, we would provide that. God knows how many jobs it creates, and it's not plant.
So you're really creating a platform for an industry or for an ecosystem around cannabis, not only for people that are using cannabis in different ways, but actually working with cannabis, researching cannabis, doing business in the cannabis space.
Exactly. It lands up being a players association for alternatives, in a sense. You know what I mean? It really lands up being, and because they don't want to touch it, and it's controversial to them, so that's where we fit in. And we've already been working with the NHL Alumni Association and really trying to implement the program through them. But getting back to what we were talking about is that again, whether the guy is hurt, is struggling, whether he's lacks identity or purpose, or he again just wants to find something to grab onto as far as the next portion of his life. Like, again, we offer all that stuff, and it depends on how deep you want to go with it. You know what I mean? And there's guys that say we had a couple hockey guys that one of them was a musician. And then one of our football guys is like starting this art program, and it's basically kind of like expressing yourself through art, through the arts, and you know what I mean. And so we kind of connect these two guys, and it lands up acting as like a multi-level, multi-purpose type of platform where there's just a resource to connect with different guys and see how they're doing, or see what they're using, or see what they're into, maybe sharing business opportunities. Like, it's all of that, you know what I mean? And it's amazing some of the stuff that's come out of this. And it's really just been totally grassroots, like, as far as it started off, just be like, let's just educate about cannabis. And then all of a sudden the pieces started falling together.
Kind of
Lindy Snyder's our chair and co-founder. She's the daughter of Ed Snyder, who used to own the Flyers. Yeah. So you can imagine how connected she is into the big business. And we're really trying to just have all these different opportunities for guys. Because what we've learned is that guys are really, really struggling. You know what I mean? And a lot of these guys keep quiet. And at least we give a platform here where, like, if you see us or hear about us, like, reach out, because I have to believe we can help you in some capacity. Yeah. Because most of these guys are struggling with mental health and substance abuse problems, and then obviously with that they struggle with purpose and identity. Because what we've learned too is that once you retire from being an athlete, it's so ego driven. Yeah. Everyone knows who you are for the job you do, and that's it, right? Not for really what you stand for, or really the human being inside of you. So guys struggle with that, because when the lights turn off, like, who are you and what do you do and how do you contribute to society? And most guys don't have an answer to that. Yeah. So they just try and fill the void with a job, quote unquote, or just something to do to make some money, but there's no fulfillment. And you know what I mean? And then another thing what cannabis offers is the ability to give back and get back into the community, and essentially being a healer, right? I mean, you're introducing an age-old herb back to your people and speaking the good word. So I think there's fulfillment. I've felt the fulfillment, because I mean, I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me after speaking engagement or stuff I post, and the stuff I'm doing, saying, well, we've gotten some hemp oil, we signed up for the medical cannabis program, and we got unbelievable results and all these positive things. So I know it's a healing tool. It's just really leading the horse to water and letting the horse drink it himself, type of thing. You know what I mean?
So beyond if we take out kind of the legalization aspect of it, what are the big challenges that you see in kind of the work that you're trying to do? Is it about messaging? Is it industry? Is it product development? Like, what are the things that you see as kind of the big challenges in terms of having cannabis-based products have the impact that you see they could have, but for the challenges? What are the things that are in the way?
I think that the two biggest things, and you mentioned them both, is the messaging, and then the science of it all, right? So the messaging, there's so much confusion right now, especially here in America. So you have we call recreational cannabis, and some people call it resinous cannabis or cannabis. And then you have hemp, and you have hemp seed oil, and you have Rick Simpson oil, and you have all these different levels of hemp seed oil, CBD oil, and hemp extract, and all this stuff. So, like, clearing up the messaging and really separating the two. And initially, when I started Hemp Heals Foundation, it was before I even really knew all these different phytocannabinoids, but it was really to separate, even though hemp is a cannabis variety, is really separating the recreational, and I don't even use the word marijuana, say marijuana from industrial hemp. So right off the bat, you have two divides. And it really is an education thing, because most people are so uneducated on all of this that they think it's all the same thing. So
well, not only are they uneducated, they're actually miseducated. I mean, a lot of people,
exactly.
It's not that they don't know, they actually know the wrong thing.
It's exactly it. So it's worse. So we're basically reteaching a belief system, right? I mean, it's like you're going from not only just like teaching them the science of it and the actual differences of the oils and all that stuff, but like the one thing that they were told is so negative and so bad their whole life is actually a healing plant. So like that one's hard for them to wrap their head around. Yeah. And then you got to master the messaging, and that's again, separating the two sides of the plants, the two varieties, and then within that, separating the different extraction process and the different end results. And you said the different products, and then how those products can help with their conditions. I mean, if you're dealing with a brain injury, like a topical on your arm isn't the right solution. Clearly, I mean, the method of delivery has to be accurate to what you're trying to treat, and and certain things wouldn't be used for certain conditions. So I mean, that's the whole messaging and the education portion of it. But then the science of it, you know what I mean? There's so much pseudoscience already, the propaganda science that's kind of gotten to us to where we are today based on BS science, but really legitimizing that, and there is science out there. studies. I mean, but we have to look to like Israel, or we have to look like abroad, because I mean, God knows there's nothing in America because we haven't been able to study it, and as well as Canada as well. So I mean, it's kind of like everything we know about cannabis seems to be very anecdotal based. But then if you really dig deep in around that, you'll learn the history of cannabis. The science is kind of already there. You learn about the U.S. pharmacopoeia and how cannabis was the main ingredient for 100 years. Like, you start connecting the dots. It's pretty simple to understand, but to draw it out in layman's terms for people to understand that this plant that we've demonized for so long is like the complete opposite of what we've been told, and here's the science to prove it. I mean, that's the challenge that we see, and that's why the story, let's say the anecdotal story of the athlete in our case, backed up by the medical doctor, the researcher, really does give it some juice, because now you got both sides. You don't just have the science, you don't just have the story, and I think that's what the world needs more of. That's part of the messaging, but again, there's so much education to be done. You know what I mean? I think they want it that way. They always want it to be confusing, because if it's confusing, then people really don't know, and they're not really good customers. You know what I mean? Or they're only good customers for the poor products. You know what I mean? The industrialized products, and not the craft, artisan, properly produced products. You know what I mean? Which I think cannabis is sacred, and we need to try our best to keep it that way, but that's for another conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I think the exciting thing for me is that, as professional athletes, you have a great platform, as role models for, so many younger people, being able to use that to really kind of help re-educate folks on cannabis, not only as a product and as a plant, but as a healing tool, is something that I think, is going to serve you very well. So we're just about at time here. So if people are interested in learning more about you, about the organizations, what are the best ways to get a hold of you, or how to find out more about the organizations and what you're doing? How do they do that?
Sure. athletesforcare.org, and then via Twitter, it's just at Athletes for Care. The same for Instagram. Those would be the simple methods. My personal Twitter handle is Riley, RILEE, Riley Coyote. Same thing for Instagram. I'm always posting stuff, as well as Athletes for Care, the different events we're attending, different things we're getting involved in. That would be the easiest. And then reach out, email, at riley@athletesforcare.com. If you want to learn more, we can send you a membership package and get you in and get you going. So, lots of good things down the pipe, too. We haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah, well, and I'll put all of those, the handles and the links and the email stuff in the show notes here for people. And I would love to keep in touch, and maybe we can do another episode at some point. We can get into some more of those details. But this was a great kind of overview of, I think, a great kind of angle to the whole cannabis space of looking at sports and recovery. And I think your whole idea of that it's really a holistic tool and a healing tool is a really important message. With that, I thank you thanks for being on the show.
I appreciate you having me. We'll talk soon.
You've been listening to Thinking Outside the Bud with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at thinkingoutsidethebud.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at thinkingoutsidethebud.com/newsletter.